Hi everyone, glad to see you. I hope everyone's enjoying their winter break. So I have a story that I'd love to read you. Someone recommended it. I read it, I loved it, and I kind of figured you might love it as well. I'll tell you a story before the story. This story reminds me of me and my brothers when we were kids because we played so rough and tough all the time. We didn't have a lot of toys, and so we made up games out of sticks or whatever we had in our yard. And one of the games that was our favorite, now looking back, we had this hammock, okay? And so we would lay one person in the hammock and they would wrap themselves up, and then two people would get on the other side and we would swing them around and then pop it in hopes that they will pop out of the hammock. Now, if you popped up, you just kind of flew up in the air and that was kind of fun. And but most of the time we would try, this terrible, I know, but we were rough and tough, and we would pop the person down, okay? So when we popped the hammock, we would try to pop the person and they would hit the ground. Sometimes we hit the ground pretty doggone hard, okay? How hard? Like an NFL player getting hit. All right, so, but we thought that was fun because we would just laugh and have a great time. Looking back now, we're like, why? Why? Okay, so that's my story before the story. So the story is actually the worst, crossed out, best Christmas pageant ever. It was written by a lady named Barbara Robinson. I bet she grew up like I did too. So here it begins. The Herdmans were absolutely the worst kids in the history of the world. They lied and stole and smoked cigars, even the girls, and talked dirty and hit little kids and cussed their teachers. Don't do that. No. Don't do that. Okay. And took the name of the Lord in vain. Don't do that either. Okay? Don't do that. And set fire to Fred Shoemaker's old broken down tool house. The tool house burned right down to the ground, and I think that surprised the Herdmans. They set fire to things all the time, but that was the first time they managed to burn down a whole building. I guess it was an accident. I don't suppose they woke up that morning and said to one another, let's go burn down Fred Shoemaker's tool house. But maybe they did. After all, it was Saturday and not too much was going on. It was a terrific fire. 2 fire engines, 2 police cars, and all the volunteer firemen, and 5 dozen donuts sent up from the Tasty Lunch Diner. The donuts were supposed to be for the firemen, but by the time they got the fire out, the donuts were all gone. The Herdmans got them. What they couldn't eat, they stuffed in their pockets and down the front of their shirts. You could actually see the donuts all around Ollie Herdman's middle. I couldn't understand why the Herdmans were hanging around the scene of their crime. Everybody knew the whole thing was their fault, and you'd think they'd have brains enough to get out of sight. One fireman even collared Claude Herdman and said, "Did you kids start this fire smoking cigars in the tool house?" But Claude just said, "We weren't smoking cigars." And they weren't. They were playing with Leroy Herdman's Young Einstein chemistry set, which they stole from the hardware store. And that's how they started the fire. I'm going to read bits and pieces to go a little bit faster. And when we read bits and pieces of a book, it's called excerpts. The experts wrote it. Okay, so the fire chief got us all together there. There were about 15 to 20 kids around watching the fire, and he gave us a little talk about playing with matches and gasoline and dangerous things like that. I don't say that's what happened here, he told us. I don't know what happened here, but that could have been it. And you see the results. So let that be a good lesson to you boys and girls, and don't play with fire, gasoline, and matches. Of course, it was a great lesson for the herdmans. They learned that whenever there's a fire, there'll be free donuts sooner or later. I guess things would have been different if they'd burned down, say, the Second Presbyterian Church instead of the tool house shed. But that tool house was about to fall down, and the neighbors had pestered Mr. Shoemaker to do something about it because it looked awful, and they were sure there were big rats in there. So everybody said the fire was a blessing in disguise. So those herdmans never got in any trouble. But they were just so all around awful you could hardly believe they were real. Ralph, Imogene, Leroy, Claude, Ollie, and Gladys. 6 skinny kids, they were all alike except for being different sizes and having different black and blue places where they had clonked each other. They lived over a garage at the bottom of Sproul Hill. Nobody used the garage anymore, but the Hermans used to bang the door up and down just as fast as they could to see if they could squash one another. That was their idea of a game. Where other people had grass in their front yard, the herdmen had rocks. And where other people had hydrangea bushes, the herdmans had poison ivy. There was also a sign in their yard that said, "Beware of the cat." New kids always laughed about that until they got a look at that cat. It was the meanest looking animal I ever saw. It had 1 short leg and a broken tail and 1 missing eye. And the mailman wouldn't deliver anything to the herdmans because of it. "I don't think it's a regular cat at all," the mailman said to my father. "I think those kids went up the hill and caught themselves a bobcat." "Oh, I don't think you can tame a wild bobcat," my father said. "Hello, kitty. Come on in. Yeah, I'm talking about you. Come on." And anyway, he said, "I'm sure you can." They'd never try to tame it. They'd just try to make it wilder than it was to begin with. It was their plan. If that was their plan, it worked. The cat would attack anything it could see out of its 1 eye. One day, Claude Herdman, he brought the cat to school to a show and tell. Oh my gosh, he didn't feed it for 2 days, and that made it even meaner. It came down on top of the blackboard ledge and clawed 4 big long scratches all the way down the blackboard as soon as he let it out of the box. Whoa. The teacher yelled for everyone to get out of the room and run because it was just scratching everyone up and shedding fur and scattering books and paper went everywhere. Pretty soon, the teacher was running around trying to smack it with a broom, but she had put a coat over her head to protect her, and basically she couldn't see anything because she had the coat over her head, and she would just yell, "Here, kitty, kitty," and then smack wherever she heard that cat hissing. Oh my goodness. She knocked over the Happy Family dollhouse and the globe of the world and broke an aquarium full of 20 gallons of water and about 65 goldfish. Well, that cat had a meal, didn't it? It sure did. So after that school banned all live animals for show and tell. Oh my goodness. Mother didn't expect to have anything to do with the Christmas pageant except to make me and my little brother Charlie be in it. We didn't want to, and to make Father go and see it, and he didn't want to. Every year he said the same thing. "I've seen the Christmas pageant." "You haven't seen this year's Christmas pageant," Mother would tell him. "Charlie is a shepherd this year." "Charlie was a shepherd last year." "No, you go on and go. I'm just going to put on my bathrobe and sit by the fire and relax." There's never anything different about the Christmas pageant. "There's something different this year," Mother said. "What?" "Charlie is wearing your bathrobe." So that year, my father went to see his bathrobe, he said. Actually, he went every year, but it was always a struggle. And Mother said that was her contribution to the Christmas pageant, getting my father to go to it. But then she got stuck with the whole thing when Mrs. George Armstrong fell and broke her leg. Our Christmas pageant isn't what you'd call a 4-star entertainment. Mrs. Armstrong breaking her leg was the only unexpected thing that would ever happen. Everything was always the same every year. So, boys and girls, I'll read some more tomorrow. See you later for now. And remember, don't do all the things that the Herdmans were doing, but you'll be really surprised at the ending. I know you'll love it. See you later.